frame still? All right, so this is not a full endorsement interview, obviously. This is a preliminary meeting with our editorial board to get to know you as one of the leading candidates for city council in this upcoming cycle. Nigel, any thoughts about how we're doing this?
So why don't we just start with you, sort of, since we're filming it and people won't know who you are, just introduce yourself, tell us where you work now, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. My name is Carmen Rubio, and I'm the Executive Director of Latino Network in Portland.
And you are running for?
I'm running for City Council.
And the seat currently held by?
Amanda Fritz, position 1.
Have you run for office before?
I have not run for office before, unless you count EMU board at college. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not counting.
Okay.
So what prompted you to run for office this year?
Well, what prompted me to run, in short, is the really terrible environment right now that we're living in, not only across the country, but how it's impacting the local community, and in particular the community that I live in and work in.
So could you be a little more specific about that? What are the negative impacts that you're seeing in Portland for the community you represent?
Right now, in this political environment, terrible divisiveness. I'm seeing a lot of fear and trauma in communities that are vulnerable, communities of color. I'm seeing division among groups that haven't had this level of tension before. And it just makes our work as a social safety net that much harder. And so more importantly than any other time in my life, I feel like it's important to have representative leadership of the communities.
So what specifically could you do or would you like to do on the city council that would address some of the concerns that you're raising?
Well, I would want to make sure that the voices of those that represent who Portland makes up today is represented at every level of government, in every bureau. That we also have the ability to learn how to bring people together around common goals. I believe that the city also could better position itself to move into this next generation and be more effective and targeted and strategic when you include people with different lived experiences. Over the past 100 plus years, I think 106 years, since this commission form of government has been in place, there have only been 3 people of color elected to city council. Only 3.
So could you give us a couple of examples of how the lack of representation is hurting the Latino community?
Mm-hmm. I think it's hurting not just the Latino community, but any community that doesn't have an avenue to have its issues rolled up into policy that could actually be efficient and targeted to get to root causes. And some of the ways that I think that impacts is in housing. Homelessness is a huge issue for our community. For a long time, housing and homelessness was looked at really more as an issue for those that are housed and unhoused and living outside only. And it wasn't until more voices were around the table that we looked at the issue and to understand how homelessness and houselessness shows up in other communities. And so after looking at it through that lens, we've realized the problem is incredibly larger than we ever even fathomed that it was. And so it's going to take multi-tiered approaches, different kinds of approaches, it reaches, to get into those different vulnerable pockets of community.
Could you walk through for us 3 or 4 of what you think are the most critical issues facing the city, and then talk about what you would do to address them? And sometimes it helps to compare apples to oranges, so maybe what you can do is talk about how you either agree or disagree with some of the current city commission in terms of how they're approaching whatever those critical issues you have determined.
Sure. So one of the most critical issues I just talked about, housing and homelessness, that's obviously number 1 on everybody's mind right now. And I know that there are a lot of great folks already thinking through ways to do that. But I also think that we need to bring in folks who have who understand how it works on the ground with community-based organizations, folks who don't know how to navigate or understand the system. I think that it's critically important for us to work across multiple bureaus and multi-jurisdictions to tackle this issue, and I feel like there's room to improve that.
That sounds like you're talking about just communication. Like not any structural changes, just we need to do a better job of communicating to dispossess people about affordable housing options. Is that what you're
Well, I don't know that it's just communication. I think it's also about alignment. It's about budgeting for the outcome that you want.
So, for example, what would you do differently?
For example, I would definitely advocate for more prevention programs and intervention programs. One of them is rent assistance. As a community-based organization that disperses funds for the city and the county to needy families and individuals, we see people in crisis that come in our doors every single day.
So that's a great example. So that's one of the things the
Yes.
Latino Network does?
Yes.
The city hands funds to you and you hand them off?
Yes.
And what you're saying is not enough?
It's not enough.
How much have you been getting every year for the past X years? And has it been increasing or decreasing?
Well, I can get back to you on the exact amount that we
Well,
get.
roughly.
It varies. I would say around 500,000 to 600,000 to disperse
A year?
a year.
And
But
so
it goes up and down depending on when more availability comes in. And we're a subcontractor to another contractor.
Right.
But my point in telling you all this is that if we do not have mechanisms and a system to ensure that we allocate money to be dispersed over the course of the year, we would easily run out in the first few months of it if we had it. The need is huge, and we
So you
need to
have
figure
people
out.
who are income qualifying, walking in your doors, they're passing whatever tests need to be passed, and you don't have funds for them.
We run out of funds, just like a lot of other organizations. This is not an issue just at our organization. It's community-wide.
And so are you saying that if elected, you will vote to radically increase the amount of rent assistance that the city gives? We are trying to pin you down a little bit.
Yes, yeah, I'm seeing that. I would definitely support increasing rent assistance as one of many other strategies.
What else?
I also believe in the importance of permanent supportive housing. That's another, wraparound support systems for those who do need assistance. Once we place people in housing, some people, that won't just be enough. We need to support them through social services, mental health, substance abuse, etc., to ensure that they stay in housing and they have the supports that they need to thrive there.
Okay. So let's move beyond housing and
Okay.
assistance. What's another critical issue and how would you address it?
Another critical issue, I think something that's interesting to me, and I have been watching, is how the Office of Civic Life is taking shape over the last few years. I think the concept is really important, and I don't think it's a new concept about more inclusion into civic life. So I think that some of the steps and the goals the steps they've taken, the goals have been good. I also think there's some room to be even more creative about how we retain people who are already bought in and invested in.
You're talking about the whole neighborhood association.
I'm talking about that and other partners.
So with respect to this issue of does the neighborhood association have too much power? Chloe's trying to strip them of some power. You're supportive of Chloe's position on this?
I'm supportive of the position of including more voices at the table. And I think that that's something that neighborhood associations themselves want as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that how we do that is an interesting one. And it's clear from what I've read that there have been communications issues there as well.
If you were elected and you could wave a wand and change the form of government, would you? And if so, because it's a related question.
Yes.
What would you push
Change
toward?
the form of government? Yes, I would.
What would you push toward?
I would push towards districts.
Full districts or part districts or?
I would push towards full district. Well, can you explain to me what you mean by full and part?
Well, so, some are pitching, there would be 5 city commissioners, 3 of them would be from districts, 2 of them would be at large.
Mm.
And there's some are saying, no, every district should be at large and there ought to be.
So that's what some people are calling hybrid.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
I think I'm pushing for full districts. However, I do understand the need for transition too, so I would be interested in seeing how maybe a hybrid over a period of time until you get to a full district.
Are you supportive or opposed to RIP?
To RIP, can you explain what?
Residential infill project.
Oh, I'm supportive of RIP. Yeah, but residential infill doesn't mean that it's affordable, so that's a completely
Right.
separate issue. Which, yeah, it'd be great if we can.
Well, there is a
ensure
problem. You can
affordability.
tear down lots of things and then put up McMansions that are even bigger that nobody can afford. That's
Right.
the concern.
Yeah.
So housing, this sort of neighborhood association, civic life, which is related to housing.
hmm
What else is sort of top of your list of things to attack?
I'm also very interested in how we build thriving community that is in development now that still retains, the cultural personality historic to those neighborhoods, but also encouraging business growth and development, community participation, and I'm
How do you do
specifically
that?
talking about east of 82nd.
Do you live east of 82nd?
I don't. I currently live very close to 82nd. I live on 78th, and I also own a house on 59th that I'm going to move into very soon.
Southeast, northeast?
Northeast.
Do you have any thoughts about Prosper Portland and its role as a city agency and how well it's doing?
I think that it's going in the right direction. I have heard also where there are some concerns about how process takes a long time now, and that's very different than how it was before, and you have to have some ability to be nimble. And I see that differently. I feel like there needs to be a period, well, there was a period where in the development of the city, there was a lot of development and innovation, and we get lauded for that, in other places. But there were whole pockets of communities that did not participate in that development or in that advancement, or were left out and displaced, as you all know. So I really like the approach that they're taking about ensuring that how do we build a plan where everybody thrives. It is going to take a little longer on the front end because they're transitioning from an era where that didn't happen at all. It involves a lot of trust building.
What's the city you look to as a model? What's the city you say Portland needs to move in this direction to accomplish all the goals that you've identified, which I assume you wouldn't identify unless you thought they were achievable?
Right. Well, this could change, but from what I have looked at so far, for different reasons, I like the city of Seattle in the way that it has a very robust way that it engages community. I feel like their communities are very civically connected in ways that I think we're starting to get to, but
What do they do that we don't do?
well, I think they just have more community-based organizations that are plugged into more of the city operations and more city planning, things like that. They also have a more diverse and representative city council and elected local positions.
Have they tackled housing and homelessness any better than we have?
Well, that's where I still would have to take a look at that and study other cities in different dimensions. In the course of my work, I've had exposure to cities that some engage communities of color and underserved communities better than others.
So I want to come back to your thoughts on housing. You'd like to increase rental assistance and also permanent supportive housing. So that means more money. So are there places that you think the city could spend less money, or would you be advocating for some new source of revenue?
I would have to think about that. I haven't, I'll get back to you on my thoughts on that. I'm still learning the budget and reading it. But I would guess that if it's an important value of the city and we really care about it, we should budget to our values.
So you worked for Mayor Potter and also for Commissioner Fish. In your current job, you do contract with the city or subcontract with the city?
Yes, we do some direct contracts, and then we are a sub with not necessarily the city, but other government agencies.
So you've talked about your thoughts on housing and civic engagement, but so you know the city government pretty well from the inside and from the outside. What would you change? What would you seek to change if you were elected, other than the things you've already talked about in terms of the way the city operates, city government operates?
I feel like if I came to the city council, that I would really want to change how we work together, how we can create strategic alignment around goals and projects that Portlanders care about, and that we budget to those goals.
What's an example?
I know I keep coming back to it, but I really believe it. It's homelessness and housing. I think that's number one. I think thinking about how we plan for a better thriving east of 82nd Avenue is important as well. How responsive and how we change our systems of engagement and communication to who Portland is now. I think things like technology could be useful.
I think what Nigel's getting at is one advantage of your candidacy is you can say, I've been on the inside. I see how things work, and I see how things don't work.
Mm-hmm.
That's an enormous asset for someone who's running for office as opposed to someone who's from the outside and may have great points of view, but really has no understanding of how the city works.
Right.
So I think what Nigel's asking is demonstrate to us that you've got some understanding of how the mayor's office works and how the city worked with Nick Fish in ways in which it doesn't work as well as it should.
Mm-hmm.
Above and beyond more strategic alliances,
Mm-hmm.
you know, are there things that directly affect people's lives in which buildings can't get built, or zoning codes are out of date, or there's a terrible way in which contracts are led, or there's enormous inefficiency in the city bureau that comes from the benefit of you having spent as many years as you did at the seat of power.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will tell you one of the things that you mentioned. I think there are many efficiencies that could be had, and it goes back to also changing the form of government. If we had the ability to, if we wanted to initiate a reform or some sort of policy change that could be more effective across all bureaus, it would be something that we could do more efficiently. Contracting, HR, all these things, these back of house functions could be consolidated and probably save us some money.
And you're saying because each bureau does its own contracting and HR work, that under a silo of a commissioner, that's keeping them from creating an efficiency across the system?
I think that's an example of one thing that I would think of. And I'm thinking of examples also that I've seen work in my own organization.
What kind of job does the mayor do?
I think the mayor's job is really hard.
What grade would you give him?
I probably would not answer that question.
Do you think it's fair for voters in the city of Portland to know what your position is on the success or failure of the current mayor?
Well, I think that the mayor is doing his best in a really hard time. I'm not going to assign a grade to him. If I'm elected, I will have to work with him, and I want to have a relationship where I could probably give him the feedback that he needed, or
You
and
could
he
say
I.
you're doing a great job and that wouldn't affect your relationship.
Mhm.
So is it safe to then assume that that's not your position?
I think he's doing the best that he can.
Well, my guess
and
is Donald Trump's doing the best that he can as well.
I don't think that's where I disagree. I don't think he's doing the best that he
In his own
can.
mind he is. I mean, with all due respect, that's just not a helpful answer. Give us a critique of the mayor. What has he done right? What has he done wrong? As part of the way to provide some insight into how you think about the city.
I think that the mayor has, like I said, having been in the mayor's office, I can understand how it's a hard job, particularly the form of government being such as it is.
You think if he had more power, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying if he had more power, he'd be a better mayor?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the form of government together with maybe, some of the more challenging and tougher issues that are happening currently,
Mm-hmm.
I think have put together, a place where it's been hard for him.
So can you, if you're not going to critique the mayor, my guess is if I ask you the same about every other member of the city commission, you'll give us the same answer. So let's try it this way. What has the city done in the last year that you disagree with?
What has the city done?
And the answer may be not a thing, but at least this is one way to attempt to understand a little bit more about your position.
I feel that the city could be better in engaging communities in the processes. I feel like there could be more involvement with how policies rolling out would impact community.
Can you give us an example?
Well, for example, is the Civic Life example. that is an example where very good intentions, a lot of great thought leaders around the table, and it was evident that there were some communication gaps there that didn't enable people to feel
And who do you hold
completely.
accountable for that? Is that Chloe's office? Is that Chloe? Is that?
I think it's a staff issue. I think that is that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Chloe's staff?
Well, not her staff,
The
her
office?
staff. Well, yeah, I think that there are ways that could have been done in a way that brought people along.
Can you talk about the police and how they've handled the protests and where you are on that
Yeah.
spectrum?
Well, I will say that I think that, in going back to the mayor, I think that the bringing folks together in coalition for that event a couple days ago, or yes, was it yesterday?
Yes.
What was I think that's a good move. I think that's something perhaps that maybe had that happen sooner, hopefully it would have prevented some things, and that it's happening now. I'm hoping that there will be an opportunity to take it forward.
Were you in the group?
I
yesterday?
was in the group yesterday. And that was a very diverse group of folks who have very strong opinions on all sides.
Again, in an attempt to pin you down, there are some who believe that the police are creating a false moral equivalency between Antifa and the Proud Boys and their supporters. There are others who are saying that's completely an unfair criticism of a police department that's got a very difficult job. Do you subscribe to either of those two?
I do think it's a false equivalency. I do not equate protesting, peaceful protesting
And-
with the intent for systems change
And
to.
you believe that police are doing so, that they're creating this false equivalency?
Well, I don't know that police are. I did hear that yesterday in the remarks.
Mhm.
Are you saying that they said that somewhere and that that's what's
No,
being?
I'm saying some people are criticizing the police for creating a false equivalency and treating these two groups the same when they're not. And I'm simply asking if that's a position you agree with.
Well, what I also heard was that they weren't treating them as if they're morally the same, if that's not the lens that they're looking at.
I'm asking you to comment on the police department and its behavior. And I'm trying to help frame it by saying, here's what some have said. Do you agree with it?
I do not agree that there is a moral equivalency on the two
That's not
sides.
the question. It's whether or not you agree that the police have created a false moral equivalency in their behavior and their treatment of both sides during the protests.
Well, I haven't heard that directly from the police, though. So I'm trying to get a sense of you're wanting me to react to a statement that has come from the police department about equating them both morally.
I'm not doing a very good job. Someone else want to
I
make
can
a
try.
try?
So Danielle Outlaw says, we don't police beliefs, we police behaviors. On the other hand, many people who spoke yesterday at the rally said it is impossible to accurately weigh the intent and danger posed by neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and the Proud Boys without understanding that their ideology is inherently hateful and violent.
Right.
And those two things cannot coexist, those two concepts. We only police actions, or we need to understand that the actions come from a place of wickedness. You have to pick one or the other. So is Danielle Outlaw right in saying we only police actions? Or are the advocates right in saying you can't only police actions, you have to police people?
I do think that you have to police actions and the intent of people. Yes.
Could you give us an example of, you've been for 10 years at the Latino Network?
Yes.
Can you give us an example of a difficult decision that you've made where you had to say no to somebody that was meaningful to you?
Where I had to say no, yes. I have many examples. I have had to sometimes, as the director, make hard decisions and that really test relationships, some that have been long-term. And one example I'll give is a very close partner of ours. We had not only just a relationship historic relationship between our organizations, but also a financial relationship. And there was a situation where they were not performing, and we had to make some serious decisions. And we went the route. I went the route of giving feedback over time, trying to engage the organization in some changing their behavior so that they would get better outcomes. And it just wasn't working, and I had to have a hard conversation about pulling back that contract.
So did you end the contract?
I reduced I cut it by half,
So can you actually
or reduced it.
talk a little bit more about your organization, its size, how many employees, how it's changed during your tenure?
Yeah. So when I started at Latino Network, the organization was a small nonprofit. I believe we had about 8 employees. And we had a few contracts and done some fundraising and some grants, and we had budgeted probably approximately around $500,000. So I came directly from Nick Fish's office, and in working there in my first few months, discovered some issues and problems. So I had to sort of I'm a quick study, so I had to learn very quickly how to address these issues. Some deficits that were there, and so we've just steadily over the past several years have been building out a strong foundation, starting with our financials, financial health, also trying to ensure that it's a good place to work for staff so that we retain staff and prevent turnover, which can be very expensive for any organization. And so today we have a staff of approximately 20, give or take, plus or minus 20 during, seasonal work, etc. And then also we are in 3 locations, and our operating budget for this next year is $10.2 million.
Where do most of your funds come from?
We have a significant amount from grants and contracts, and then we are growing our individual donor base.
So in addition to the financial assistance, rent assistance, can you talk some of the other activities
that we provide?
Yeah,
we have a continuum of programs and services, starting from early childhood, home visits for new moms and new parents. We do
county contractor as well?
County contractor and some philanthropy, some support from grants. We also do in-school support, so we do high school retention, we do some middle school programming, we do work with adjudicated and high-risk youth to prevent recidivism. We also provide family stability programs like the rent assistance and energy assistance, foreclosure prevention. We also are doing some advocacy and leadership programs. We started in advocacy as a small organization. It was designed to really be a convener of other Latino organizations when we were first started. And we used to advocate for the city and county to better meet the needs of the growing Latino community in the 90s. And in the wake of OCHA closing, which was one of our longer standing Latino nonprofits, they closed their doors. I can't remember the exact year, but I want to say somewhere around 2006 or 7. It left a huge footprint for not only just services and supports for the Latino community, but also some political influence locally. And so that was our goal in building out Latino Network. We wanted to be a place where when things happened and advocacy needed to happen from a community level, we would be there to support that advocacy, that we'd also be a place of leadership development, and we'd provide people the opportunity to not only receive services but work for us and learn skills that they can go on and be agents of change in their communities and other places. Now we're getting into the advocacy realm where we're going a little bit more upstream, and we developed a C4 last year, and we had a really good session this year advocating for student supports and family supports.
Could
I'm sorry to jump around so much, but could you talk about when people come for rent support, for instance, what's the average kind of amount of money that they would get?
I would say anywhere between, I've seen maybe $600 to maybe $1,500.
Lump sum.
Lump sum per person?
Yeah.
I actually would have to get back to you on that.
Okay, but we're not talking about huge amounts of money.
No.
Okay, so it looks from your CD that you're seeking to qualify for public financing, is that right? And how much would you get?
How much would I get?
Yeah.
Total max?
Yeah, if you qualify.
I would get $250 per person, and I would get matched $6 to one.
Okay.
I'm
So
sorry, it's $6 for every,
for every dollar.
Every dollar for the first $50 of any contribution by a Portland resident.
In the commission race, you can qualify for how much total money for the
Total money, I believe it's $250,000.
So you know what my next question is. You've talked about the need for rent assistance money. So $250,000 would come from the city and go to your campaign. That's money that they're not going to spend on rental assistance or wraparound services. So to help us understand your thinking on that. Why should taxpayer dollars go to fund your campaign rather than to go fund these services that you've described that are so underfunded?
Well, what I believe right now is that this program will help people like me who are working candidates that otherwise would not have an opportunity to run for city council, to be there and be in a position to advocate for more money.
so pardon my ignorance, I can't remember the two last elected officials to city council, Joanne and Chloe, right?
Yeah.
Did either of them use public financing?
It wasn't in play. It wasn't legal at that time. Remember, it went out of,
Right.
Emily Boyles took it
Right.
down the first time, and
Right.
now it's back again.
But
Different form.
But working people ran for office, raised funds. What's the difference?
You're talking about working for a regular campaign.
Well, he's saying if Joanne and Chloe, Udaly,
I
Joanne.
mean, Amanda Fritz could self-fund her campaign, right? She wrote a check, I understand that. But Joanne and Chloe were in similar situations to you. Workers, had jobs, had a mortgage to pay, or in Chloe's rent. They ran and were elected, not using public financing. Therefore not doing what Nigel's doing, is setting up this question of taking money away from potential rent assistance. Did you feel you wouldn't be able to raise enough money to run?
I think, I feel like it would be harder to raise that amount of money, that it would require me personally. I'm not saying this for the other candidates, but I run a nonprofit. I'm needed there. And I also am on my own. So all these things, I would not be able to afford to run while taking some time off. That is, if I really wanted to run and have the opportunity to really learn issues and really meet with people and raise money.
If you win, will you stay with the Latino Network?
If I win, you mean,
City council, if you're elected to city council.
if I'm elected to city council, will I stay employed at Latino Network? Will stay employed until I have to take office.
Okay. But when you take office, you would resign? from the
Oh,
Latino
yes,
Network.
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I just want to make sure we've touched on all the issues that you think are critical facing the city. You've talked about civic life, you've talked about housing and homelessness. You brought up the issue of the police. It sounds like that's not a huge critical issue for you. Are there other critical issues that you'd love to tackle if elected?
Well, I believe that I touched on a little bit about ensuring that prosperity happens for all of Portlanders, and particularly in regions that haven't had the benefit of a lot of city planning or resources or development, like the inner.
How do you think that happens in practice? How would you force the city to reallocate resources more equitably?
I think that one of the ways that we would do that was, I think Prosper Portland's approach so far has been a good one from what I've seen from the community perspective, engaging us in planning and conversations and hosting discussions to hear from community in different parts of the city, I think has been beneficial.
So you are intentionally or not separating sort of your attitudes about some things from some other members of city council. I mean, if you were to ask Joanne Hardesty about Prosper Portland, she would say they have absolutely no credibility in the African-American community. I mean, Rukai Adams of Meyer Trust, probably one of your grantors, says exactly the same thing. They're well-intentioned. I don't want them at the table because they have absolutely no credibility. It sounds like you've got a different experience.
Well, I think they're on the right track. I would not say that they have started out that way. I think that's why they're doing these things, to rebuild credibility and to rebuild relationships.
Are you impressed by how they're doing that work? How's it going?
Well, it hasn't been the focal point of my work at Latino Network, but in the ways that we are engaged, I have been impressed that they have taken steps to ensure that they have a more representative staff and that they are taking steps to have conversations that probably should have been had decades ago and are interested in more reconciliation, or learning that at least before being able to move over, and are now hearing communities about, if you're coming to this community, you shouldn't come unless you're engaging us. You're going to make a commitment to, preserving the tradition and culture and the neighborhoods that are here. I think those are important things when we're talking about city planning, and it needs to happen east of 82nd. That's our opportunity to do it, right?
Is the county a larger funder to Latino Network than the city?
Yes.
I would assume that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume they are because of their mission.
Mm-hmm.
This is sort of a backhanded way of asking the question. You talk about issues that are critical to you. There are some issues that are important functions of the city. Making sure the potholes are fixed, making sure fires get put out, that you seem somewhat less interested in, which is all good and fine, and you're really focusing on social services. And yet, for the most part, that's really the province of Multnomah County. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Resolution A, which intended to say social services, are the function of the county, as evidenced by the fact that they are a larger grantor in the city of Portland to Latino Network, which is clearly providing important social services. So, are you running for the wrong office? Should you not be running for Multnomah County Commission?
No, I'm running for city council. And honestly, the people that I work with, they don't really, they're not asking if this is a city bureau or a county department that I'm going to get rent assistance, and then I walk across the hall to ensure that my kid's enrolled in a pre-K program. They really don't care. They just want to know that they're getting the services that they need, and that they have the ability to live and make a decent wage in a city that they can afford to live in. So it behooves us as a city to make sure that we have the ability to create and weave together ways that any Portlander can move through the system, and that we're all working together and that it feels seamless on the other end. So no, I don't think I'm running for the wrong seat. I'm running for the right one.
What kind of political capital would you spend in trying to change the form of city government? I mean, a lot of people criticize it, but since Robert Hall put a ballot measure on the ballot in 2004, nobody's actually tried to do anything. So what would you do?
Well, what would I do? Well, I think it would depend on what I'm asked to do, or what I'm hearing from my community and how strongly my community feels that this is something that they want. I'm on the record of supporting it back then, and a lot of the folks that I worked with and folks that haven't had a lot of access to City Hall prior to that time were also supportive of that endeavor.
So would you push to put such a measure on the ballot, or what? I mean, I'm trying to gauge how aggressively you want to change this current structure.
Well, I think that's something I'd have to think about the timing. But I know the city charter is coming up, so, but if there is the urgency and there's the energy to do that and there's some support, I would support that.
I forget who the author was, but we had in this week's paper a story about a preschool that's fighting a local cannabis dispensary. Did you have
The author is in the room.
I wrote that.
Who are you? That's Katie Shepard. So you read that story. It sounds like you're familiar with the issue.
I'm familiar with the issue. I tagged that story, and I'm going to have things I say to.
There's a clear one in which you're either siding with a dispensary or siding with preschools? And I'm just wondering.
No, I side with the preschool on that one.
So you think the law should be changed?
I have to read, I want to read the article and learn a
Well,
little bit more about.
The assumption of our story is you may like it or dislike it, but the law is the law. You'll have to change the law. So I guess our question is, do you think the law should be changed so that preschools are treated the same?
That are included in that as one of the places that
You can't
shouldn't
cite
be around.
those
Yeah,
kinds
yeah.
of-
I think so.
So this is an area in which you disagree with Amanda Fritz.
Probably yes.
What was the first concert you ever attended?
The first concert?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm really dating myself, but
Most
I
of
don't
us
even,
are
I don't even
older
know
than
if
you
you
are.
know who these people are, but the Jets.
Where was the concert?
It was over here at
The Just?
the
Jet.
Jets.
J-U-S-T?
Jetts.
Oh, wow, okay.
What kind of music?
Do you remember them?
No.
No. Do you?
Yeah, I got a crush on you.
Yes. Yeah, I really liked it. It was
They
like,
were a Polynesian pop.
yes, they were a Polynesian pop
And
group.
where was the concert?
It was at the University of Portland. And my parents drove me and waited in the car during the whole concert because they didn't allow me to go by myself. Yeah.
Other questions?
You know, we haven't gotten into any of your personal background. I know you grew up in Portland, Hillsborough.
Mhm.
I didn't know that. See, there you go.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about where your interest in politics came from.
Sure. So a little bit about how I got to Oregon, or my family got to Oregon. My grandfather was a bracero. He was a Mexican contracted laborer from Durango, Mexico. He came up in the 40s, and then later my grandmother joined him in Texas. And they worked as farm workers in Texas and in the Southwest, and then made their way up to the Napa Valley in California, and picked everything you can think of. Eventually made their way up to North Plains, Oregon, and settled there in the migrant camps. And my dad had a similar trajectory. He's Mexican from Chihuahua, and his mom and siblings came up by way of New Mexico, Artesia, and then made their way up to Oregon, and that's where my parents met. And so I have a lot of family. My mom is one of 6 siblings. No, I'm sorry. My mom is one of 11 siblings, and my dad is one of 6. And so I have probably over 30 first cousins. I grew up around them. I was the first in my family to go to college and graduate. Went to U of O, and it was when I was growing up. My parents were really involved in the community, and they were very involved in Centro Cultural and Virginia Garcia, and I was always being dragged along as a kid, even though my parents didn't have a lot of money. I learned about, community and coming together and how we help each other. We didn't have a lot of money. I moved probably about 10 times before I was 14 years old. So that's why housing and stability in families is really important to me. Let's see, what else can I tell you? After I graduated, in college, I got very, very interested in politics after I took my first Chicano studies class. That's the first time I think I really understood that my community had a history in this country, because I had never heard it before. So I'm hearing all these amazing new initiatives, about ethnic studies in schools. It's really important because it helps people develop their identity and their confidence later, and that's where I learned about mine, and got really involved in student government, involved in MECHA. Then after I graduated, was volunteering at nonprofits and organizations and causes and candidates for a while, just here and there. And out of school, I first worked for Milagro Theater.
Oh yeah.
And then after Milagro, I got a really great entry-level job at Metropolitan Group, and worked there. Eric Fishman. And I worked there, and I knew it was a really great opportunity. And it was at the time, and again, I'm dating myself, but I was a project assistant or support person, and I was supporting these leads on these projects that were the West Side Light Rail grand opening, and the expansion of the Oregon Convention Center, and working these events and working these public, contracts or public publicity contracts, that's where I met Serena Cruz, and she was running for office. She's very young, and I was super starstruck because she was the first person that seemed to have an experience like my own running for office. And so I volunteered, and she eventually offered me a job. And so I worked for her on her campaign. And then she ran, and then she won. So that's sort of my trajectory of getting into government.
Growing up in the Portland area, did it feel like a welcoming place for Latinx people?
In Hillsborough, at that time that I grew up, it was much more rural than it is now. It's a suburb now. And back then, the big city for us was Aloha, or Beaverton. And there were a lot of families that I grew up with, and we were all the kids of, our parents were all migrant workers together, or a lot of them were. So we were the second generation and third generation of that. And then there were other kids that were, the folks that, their parents had farms or their parents worked at Intel. So I would say it was mixed. In some ways, growing up as a kid, there wasn't, we were all together. And there were a lot of us. So we developed relationships, but it had more of my experiences growing up and feeling a difference or racism more from adults than I did kids. So it was challenging, and it was hard on my family. But my family's really it's a family of hard workers. They were farm workers, and they were surviving, and so we were often taught, to be respectful, work hard, but also, help other people when you see that they need help. I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah.
Is it better now or worse?
I would say in some ways it's better in that there are more of us that have had access to things that we previously hadn't had. I was the first in my family to go to college and graduate, and I felt I was so embarrassed or almost feeling like I didn't deserve to be there, that it was really hard for me to ask for help. And so navigating systems and being afraid to ask for help when you need it, and that was something very formative to me too, and how I lead and how I think about engaging with community today. And I wanted to tell you, also a little bit. You're asking what led me to run for office. This is formative for me because one of the most formative experiences I had was when I worked for Serena Cruz, and I was super excited to work for her. First Latina, she was young, and I remember not even 2 weeks into the job at the county. We got a phone call from this woman from just, in rural central Oregon, and her name was Mrs. Morales, Senora Morales. And I remember she calling and wanting to talk, she needed to talk in Spanish, and she was looking for help for this issue. I can't remember what the issue was, but it was something local. And we were like, why is she calling us, all the way in Portland? And it was pretty clear that she didn't really care that we were in Portland, and she knew that she was calling us, but she was really calling us because she wanted to talk to someone who understood her and who wouldn't judge her on what her issues were, and that would treat her with dignity. And that was just really formative for me. And to think that this woman is calling someone so far away, she doesn't even know, but just because this person she's assuming has an experience like hers, that she won't be judged and she'll be treated with respect. And so we helped her, and we connected her with the right person. We did the warm handoff and everything, and that was fine. But it just that was really important to me in how I view my role coming into any space where I have the opportunity to engage on policy issues, that I know it's a responsibility that that's bigger than any one person. We have a responsibility to representing everyone. And so that's really part of what compels me to run. I feel like I want to be the person that can bring that perspective and be the person that feels that people feel comfortable coming to, no matter, all Portlanders, no matter what your background is.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. You would be the first Latinx person elected to Portland City Council,
Yes,
correct?
I would.
We're living in a moment in which the President of the United States uses racist slurs against elected officials who come from different backgrounds than him. Does that frighten you at all?
Does he fight, or
For the moment, really,
Yes.
like not. I mean,
Yes, it's terrifying. It's horrible. There are days where I very much have to put aside my feelings around, being fearful about what's next around the corner for all of us, and really say encouraging words to my staff so that they can feel some confidence in going back out there and talking to, crying parents and children who are fearful about what's happening or afraid to go to the doctor's office now, or not showing up for school. Every single time one of these actions happens, or the next shoe that drops, every time something happens, there is a direct reaction or impact on our communities here.
I would imagine your office sees
All of it.
all of it, right? Like, I mean, in the days following El Paso, for example,
Yes.
what happens in your office in those days?
It's quiet. People are sad. People cry. It's somber, and we've had to really build in time where we actually can take care of each other too. And I don't say that lightly. It's just that the trauma keeps rolling out in waves, and really we have no way to prepare for it other than now we have to be always prepared. So much that we had to advocate and apply for funding and advocate for funding so that we could have a dedicated person in our office just triaging any call around fear about immigration, or teaching people how they, what their rights are, or understanding, how to connect to an attorney that can help them, or maybe if they don't qualify for attorney, in this condition, in their specific situation, but other things that we can do. The needs are so great during that time, right after all these things started rolling out, that, we were looking for resources everywhere to give people answers that no one had an answer to yet, because the policy was always changing or shifting, or, they said one thing one day and, there was an injunction or a block or, an action another day. So it was always shifting sands. So we had to work with Oregon Law Center to develop, here's a bare basics in Spanish, how to prepare your family in case you're deported or sudden removal. This is how you can get, things lined up. I mean, these are horrible things that we have to plan for with the community, and all of us were sad as we were doing it, but it's something that at least we felt like we could do to help families get prepared.
There's this famous Toni Morrison quote that she actually said at Portland State regarding the idea that the most insidious thing about racism is that you have to expend your energy reminding people of your right to exist. And it seems like one of the things you're saying is that you have to spend now money.
Right. Yes.
Doing exactly that.
Yeah, there is a financial impact on this, for sure. Yeah, it just makes everybody's work that much harder as a safety net, and, providing services for the community. And all the relationships that we're trying to build with government and all the, and with health institutions and, other entities where they're trying to reach the hardest to serve, becomes that much harder.
So my last question, and then I'll let it out.
Yeah.
What can Portland City Council do on what we've just discussed?
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about that, and I feel like there are ways, and I'm interested in hearing from the community, and I know that some folks who, have ideas about this, and I really am interested in learning more about how we can make our sanctuary city really a more sanctuary city, that there are real things in there that will enable people to know and feel like they're safe.
Any idea that you've heard so far that you like?
Well, I'm interested in understanding too how we can actually talk about other ways that we can safeguard people's protection. There was some really great work done at the state by Diego and Teresa Alonso Leon around that. And so that's one of the things we're talking about in our organization as we do all these, rental assistance disbursements and provide services to people in schools. We're finding one of the impacts is that people are a little reticent sometimes to sign up for services now because, they're not sure where that information will go. So what can we do as a city? Will it require some sort of, code change or ordinance or hopefully more than a resolution to actually put some more teeth in that?
We're out of time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. That's really helpful.
Yeah.